What if I told you that the Joker, Thanos, and even Disney's most beloved villains are based on real people? And I'm not talking about loose interpretation. I'm talking about direct, documented connections to some of the most disturbing individuals in human history. By the end of this video, you'll never look at these characters the same way again. And trust me, you're going to want to stick around because the final villain on this list, the real person behind them, is probably someone you follow on social media right now. Let's start with everyone's favorite villain of chaos, the Joker. Now, most people know about the John Wayne Gacy connection. The killer clown who performed as Pogo at children's parties while murdering 33 young men and burying them under his house. But here's what most people don't know. The 2019 Joker movie? That wasn't inspired by a fictional character at all. It was directly based on Bernhard Goetz, the subway vigilante. December 22, 1984, New York City subway. 4 young men approach Goetz asking for $5. Goetz, a thin, nervous electronics technician, pulls out a .38 caliber revolver and shoots all 4. When one of them, Daryl Cabby, slumps in his seat, Goetz walks over and says, "You seem to be doing all right. Here's another," and shoots him again, paralyzing him for life. Sound familiar? That's literally Arthur Fleck's subway scene. But here's the really disturbing part. Goetz became a folk hero. People sent him money, flowers, marriage proposals. The media called him a symbol of fed-up citizens fighting back. Just like how society in the Joker movie celebrates Arthur's violence. Goetz spent his trial claiming he was just defending himself, but the evidence showed something darker. He'd been carrying that gun for 3 years, waiting. He'd modified the bullets to cause maximum damage. This wasn't self-defense. This was a man who wanted to hurt people and finally found his excuse. Let me know in the comments below if you knew the Joker was based on a real person, or if you just found this out. But if you think that's disturbing, wait until you hear about the real person behind the most powerful villain in the Marvel Universe. Up next is Thanos, the mad titan who wanted to eliminate half of all life. Most people think he's pure fiction, but his philosophy comes directly from Thomas Robert Malthus, an 18th century economist who argued that population growth would always outpace food production, leading to inevitable catastrophe. But here's where it gets really dark. Malthus wasn't just theorizing. He actively opposed helping the poor because he believed their suffering was necessary for population control. He wrote, "A man who is born into a world already possessed has no right of subsistence when his labor will not fairly purchase it." This isn't ancient history. Modern eco-fascists use the exact same arguments. In 1968, Paul Ehrlich wrote The Population Bomb, predicting mass starvation by the 1970s and advocating for forced sterilization programs. These ideas influenced real policies. Forced sterilizations in India, China's one-child policy, immigration restrictions based on carrying capacity. The Stanford prison experiment showed us how quickly ordinary people become villains when given power over others. Thanos isn't scary because he's wrong about overpopulation. He's scary because he represents every person who thinks they have the right to decide who lives and who dies for the greater good. Now, you might think Disney villains are just fairy tale nonsense, but you'd be wrong. And the story behind Ursula will completely change how you see The Little Mermaid forever. Ursula was directly modeled after Divine, the legendary drag queen and John Waters film star. But this wasn't just about looks. It was about taking everything Divine represented and twisting it into something sinister. Divine, whose real name was Harris Glenn Milstead, was a revolutionary performer who challenged gender norms and celebrated self-expression. Divine was bold, unapologetic, and fabulous. Divine's performances were about liberation, breaking free from society's expectations. But Disney took that energy and made it villainous. Ursula uses her power to manipulate and control, the exact opposite of what Divine stood for. It's particularly twisted when you realize that Divine died in 1988, just 1 year before The Little Mermaid was released. Disney essentially took a recently deceased LGBTQ+ icon and turned them into a cautionary tale about being different. The irony? Divine would have absolutely loved Disney's version. Divine once said, "I thank God I was raised Catholic, so sex will always be dirty." Divine understood that sometimes the best way to challenge society is to embrace being the villain they already think you are. But if you think that's a dark Disney secret, wait until you hear about the real-life dictator behind Scar. Scar from The Lion King wasn't just a generic bad lion. The animators and writers drew direct inspiration from Idi Amin, the Ugandan dictator who killed an estimated 500,000 people during his reign from 1971 to 1979. Amin, like Scar, came to power through betrayal. He was supposed to be a trusted ally of the previous leader. Amin was charismatic, intelligent, and absolutely ruthless. He expelled Uganda's entire Asian population, destroyed the economy, and turned family members against each other through paranoia and violence. The Be Prepared sequence? That's a Nazi rally. The marching hyenas, the dramatic lighting, the authoritarian imagery. It's all there. But here's what Disney didn't tell you. Amin actually admired Hitler. He called himself the conqueror of the British Empire and claimed Hitler was right about the Jews. Scar's relationship with the hyenas mirrors how real dictators used marginalized groups, promised them power, used them to seize control, then abandoned them when they're no longer useful. Amin did this with various ethnic groups throughout his reign. The most disturbing part? Amin lived in comfortable exile in Saudi Arabia until his death in 2003. He never faced justice for his crimes, just like how many real-life villains escape consequences while their victims suffer forever. Speaking of villains who escape consequences, let's talk about a Pixar villain who predicted one of today's most dangerous movements. Syndrome from The Incredibles wasn't just a disgruntled fan. He was a perfect prediction of incel culture, written years before that term entered mainstream vocabulary. Buddy Pine's origin story is textbook nice guy syndrome. He approaches his hero, gets rejected, and instead of accepting it, he decides the problem isn't with him. It's with the entire concept of heroes. Sound familiar? Real-life incels follow the exact same pattern. They approach women, get rejected, and conclude that women are the problem. They create elaborate fantasies about being superior while simultaneously obsessing over their perceived inadequacies. Syndrome's plan is pure incel revenge fantasy. Use technology to make himself superior, eliminate the natural heroes, and force everyone to recognize his greatness. He literally says, when everyone's super, no one will be. The Elliot Rodger Manifesto, written by the 2014 Isla Vesta killer, reads like Syndrome's monologue. I am the true alpha male. I am magnificent. I deserve recognition. Rodger, like Syndrome, used his intelligence and resources not to improve himself, but to punish the world for not recognizing his self-proclaimed superiority. But if you think tech-savvy villains are just fiction, you haven't heard about the real terrorist tactics behind this next villain. Zemo from Captain America: Civil War represents a terrifying evolution in real-world terrorism. Forget bombs and guns. The most effective modern terrorists use information warfare. Zemo's plan is pure psychological operations. Find existing divisions, amplify them, and watch your enemies destroy themselves. This isn't fiction. It's the playbook used by Russian intelligence, extremist groups, and even domestic political operatives. The 2016 Russian election interference campaign followed Zemo's exact strategy. They didn't try to directly attack America. They found existing social divisions and amplified them through social media manipulation. Black Lives Matter versus Blue Lives Matter. Pro-immigration versus anti-immigration. They created fake events, fake protests, and fake outrage to turn Americans against each other. Zemo succeeds where every other Marvel villain fails because he understands that the most powerful heroes are still human. They have egos, insecurities, and past traumas. Real-world psychological operations work the same way. Find the emotional triggers and exploit them. The Cambridge Analytica scandal revealed how this works in practice. They collected data on millions of Facebook users, created psychological profiles, and used targeted advertising to influence behavior. They didn't need to brainwash anyone. They just needed to show people information that confirmed their existing biases. Now, if you think those villains are scary, wait until you hear about the real-life predators behind Netflix's most disturbing villain. Kilgrave from Jessica Jones isn't just a mind control villain. He's a perfect metaphor for how real predators operate, and the inspiration comes from some very real, very powerful people. Creator Melissa Rosenberg has confirmed that Kilgrave represents every Harvey Weinstein, every Jeffrey Epstein, every powerful man who uses his position to abuse others. But the genius of the character is how his powers work. He doesn't just control actions, he makes victims believe they wanted it. This mirrors exactly how real predators operate. They use power, influence, and psychological manipulation to make victims complicit in their own abuse. Weinstein didn't just assault women, he convinced them it was necessary for their careers. Epstein didn't just abuse girls, he created an entire system where victims became recruiters. The most disturbing Kilgrave episodes show him genuinely believing he's not an abuser because his victims consented. This is literally how predators justify their actions. They rewrite the narrative to make themselves the victim or the hero. Nexium cult leader Keith Rainier used similar tactics. He convinced women they were part of an empowerment program while branding them and forcing them into human trafficking. Like Kilgrave, he genuinely believed he was helping them become stronger. But if you want to see the most accurate portrayal of a real-life villain type, look no further than The Boys. Homelander is what happens when you give a narcissistic psychopath unlimited power and a PR team. And the scary part, he's based on real people we see every day. Creator Eric Kripke has said Homelander represents the corporate psychopath, people who rise to positions of power precisely because they lack empathy and moral constraints. Studies suggest that psychopaths are 4 times more likely to be in leadership positions than in the general population. Think about it. Homelander's public persona is perfect. He says all the right things, smiles for the cameras, and presents himself as America's golden boy. But privately, he's a sadistic narcissist who views other people as objects for his amusement. This is exactly how real corporate psychopaths operate. Elizabeth Holmes convinced investors to give her billions for fake blood testing technology. She spoke at conferences, appeared on magazine covers, and was hailed as the next Steve Jobs. Meanwhile, she was knowingly putting patients' lives at risk with fraudulent test results. Homelander's relationship with social media mirrors how real narcissists use platforms like Twitter. They crave constant validation, lash out at criticism, and use their followers as weapons against perceived enemies. The show literally has Homelander checking his approval ratings obsessively. Sound familiar? The most terrifying aspect of Homelander isn't his laser vision. It's how easily people believe his lies because they want to believe in heroes. Now, if you think streaming villains are disturbing, modern horror has taken things to a whole new level. Art the Clown from the Terrifier franchise represents the evolution of horror for the social media age. Creator Damien Leone has said Art embodies the modern serial killer, someone who treats murder like performance art for an audience. Real killers like Luca Magnotta film themselves torturing animals and eventually murdering a human, posting the videos online for shock value and attention. The 2019 Christchurch shooter live-streamed his attack, turning mass murder into content. Art the Clown never speaks, but he's constantly performing. He poses for photos with his victims, creates elaborate death scenes, and seems to enjoy the theatrical aspect more than the killing itself. This mirrors how real killers increasingly document their crimes for online infamy. The Slender Man stabbing case showed how fictional villains can inspire real violence when combined with social media obsession. 2 12-year-old girls stabbed their friend 19 times because they believed it would make them proxies of a fictional character they'd encountered online. But the most psychologically accurate horror villain might surprise you. The Babadook isn't really about a supernatural entity. It's about postpartum psychosis and maternal mental health crisis. Director Jennifer Kent based the film on real cases of mothers who harmed their children during severe mental health episodes. Andrea Yates drowned her 5 children in 2001 during a psychotic episode, believing she was saving them from Satan. Susan Smith drove her car into a lake with her 2 sons inside, then claimed they'd been kidnapped. These cases show how untreated mental illness can transform loving mothers into something unrecognizable. The Babadook's design, the top hat, the long coat, the pale face, comes from early 20th century illustrations of mental illness. The creature represents how society has historically viewed and stigmatized mental health issues. What makes the Babadook brilliant is that the real horror isn't the creature. It's the isolation, exhaustion, and lack of support that creates the conditions for tragedy. The film shows how easily any parent could reach that breaking point without proper help. But if you want to see the most relevant villain for our current moment, look at Game of Thrones. Quick side note, if you're still upset about the last season of Game of Thrones, let me know in the comments below how you think it should have ended, because I'm still mad too. Anyways, the Night King isn't just a zombie leader. He's climate change personified. George R.R. Martin has explicitly said the White Walkers represent existential threats that humanity ignores while fighting petty political battles. The parallels are exact. A slow-moving but inevitable threat from the north, ignored by leaders focused on immediate power struggles, requiring unprecedented cooperation to defeat and getting stronger the longer it's ignored. Real climate scientists have been warning about global warming since the 1970s, just like the Night's Watch warned about White Walkers. Both were dismissed as alarmists or conspiracy theorists. Both threats seemed distant and abstract until they became immediate and undeniable. The King's Knight ability to raise the dead mirrors how climate change creates feedback loops. Melting permafrost releases more greenhouse gases, which causes more melting, which releases more gases. Each victory makes the enemy stronger. And speaking of modern threats, our final villain represents one of the most dangerous phenomena of our time. Kylo Ren isn't just a fallen Jedi. He's the perfect representation of radicalized youth in the internet age. A privileged young man who gets seduced by extremist ideology and turns against his own family. The real-life parallels are everywhere. Dylan Roof, the Charleston church shooter, was radicalized online through white supremacist websites. The Columbine shooters were influenced by extreme ideologies they encountered through early internet communities. Kylo Ren's backstory, feeling misunderstood, believing he's destined for greatness, turning to a charismatic older figure who validates his anger, is the exact pattern of online radicalization. Forums like 8chan, extremist Discord servers, and radical political communities all use these same recruitment tactics. The most disturbing aspect is how Kylo Ren genuinely believes he's the hero of his own story. He thinks he's bringing order to chaos, just like real extremists convince themselves their violence serves the greater purpose. Here's what's really terrifying about modern villains. They're not hiding in abandoned houses or wearing hockey masks. They're verified on Twitter, they have LinkedIn profiles, and they probably have better PR teams than most heroes.